Quantum's difficult because we think it's a threat in the future, but it's actually, most of it is occurring right now, because essentially what the nation states and the bad actors are doing is something called harvest now, decrypt later. So
I don't think I've ever heard that from anyone else.
Adoption with humans is kind of stalled because people can't use it every day, but AI can use it every day.
Crypto was actually made for AI agents. It was never really made for humans.
But it's interesting that you said like up to 100 million.
Back then, I would say like, I hope, but now it's like essentially a mathematical certainty.
All right, so Randall, you have grown your crypto channel, Crypto Love, to over 250,000 subscribers, over 2,900 videos over the past 8 years. I mean, honestly, that is a hell of a long time that you've been in the game. A lot of ups and downs, I'm sure. But the first question I have for you is actually, what is your crypto origin story?
Yeah, so it started out, I went to a conference in Bulgaria, and it was called the Infinite Man Summit. So it was kind of about like unlocking your potential as a man. And I went there, they were talking about this thing I never heard of. Or maybe I heard of it a few times before. They were talking about Bitcoin, saying if you had one Bitcoin, you'll be set for life. And meanwhile, I was working 60 some hours a week as an emergency veterinarian, trying to make ends meet, trying to pay off a ton of debt. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. So I was like, okay, I'll do some more research. And I came back home and I just started making videos, just for fun. I'm exploring. This is what Bitcoin and crypto is about. And fortunately, I caught the cycle very well. The conference was in June or July of 2017. And then I started making videos in August. And for fun, I was just like, I'll just make one a day, see how this goes. And it was in the cycle where things started taking off. And you mentioned been through ups and downs, and it is mostly downs a lot more than ups in cryptocurrency. The price goes up, but the time spent in downs is a lot longer, or so it seems. And so I just continued making videos. And for the first 6 years, I made videos every single day. And it was it was really tough because I was working full-time job on top of that. But it kind of took off, and totally unexpected to me. I didn't know what was going to work. I didn't know that the channel was going to be popular. I just, it was something I was passionate about and something that I thought was very interesting. So I just made videos.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of influencers in and out of crypto have a hard time being consistent with creating content. And that's something that I think you've mastered the skill of creating content on a consistent basis. What do you think has kept you getting up every day to make a video?
Well, it was kind of I've always been the type of person where I don't want to be the one who drops the ball. And so I just want to make sure that I do everything in my power to get stuff done. And so when I started, I just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make videos. I'm going to do every day for a month. And I did that. And just because it's like one of those things where I didn't want to drop the ball, I made a promise to myself and I just did it. And then also towards the beginning, I was using like a really old computer, and it took, I don't remember exactly how long, but it was like obnoxiously long to render a video. I think it was like 2 or 3 hours to render a video. So I would make a video and then like edit it and then, set it to render, and it would take like 2 or 3 hours. And so I was like, you know what? If I do this for 90 or 100 days straight, I'm going to buy myself a new computer. And so then that was kind of like the next push. And by that point, the ball was rolling. The channel had gained some popularity. I probably had like 10 or 20,000 subscribers at that time, which was like enormous just because of the speed that the channel built up. But it was also due to the timing, because that was, September, October of 2017, when things were like really starting to pop off and everybody was talking about cryptocurrency. And at the time, I think there were like 3 or 4 other channels. Like, that's it. There wasn't much content out there. So it was just like, and it was crazy because at that time we had no idea what we were doing. We were all flying by the seat of our pants. We were reaching out and contacting each other, being like, what are you doing? Is this okay? Can I do this? I have no idea what I'm doing. and other people were like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so like the whole concept of an influencer didn't even exist at that time. It was really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of think nowadays on like how saturated the entire market is. Like even the whole crypto or even any influencer, market nowadays, everything is just packed. So
I mean, there's probably 3 new crypto influencers every day now.
Probably the ones that just started from us talking right now, honestly.
Yeah. But I also think that's a good thing that there's influencers now, because, like technology has shifted a lot and we're all involved in technology. And so like technology evolves a lot and it takes away the actual things that humans need to do. So like, one time I read this, something by Henry Ford, the guy who created the automobile. And his whole idea behind creating the production line was to basically take away work from the people so people would have more time to spend in nature. And you see how well that worked. But but like essentially all this technology that we have, especially with like AI and everything with that, it takes away the work from the people, but it gives us an opportunity to do more of what we actually enjoy, which I think is where the kind of creator space comes in, where you can actually do something that you enjoy, something that you want to do. And if you're lucky, you can earn a living from it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, Chris and I use AI a lot. I know you use AI a lot, and we all really take advantage of it to do the things that are sort of the grunt work, right? Like the things that we don't want to do, but they're required in order for us to have, a business and do our job. So pretty cool.
I mean, I think it's almost amazing nowadays. Like try to think of pre-AI, right? Like how did we even get anything done?
Yeah, I totally get it. Like pre-AI, I mean, like, can you think of a time before you wrote, posts or emails with AI?
Dude, I'm even too lazy to search for anything anymore. Like I don't even want to look through Google search results anymore. I'm just like, throw it in the AI, it'll find the answer for me, or at least give me an answer that's convincingly right, even though it could be wrong.
Yeah, sometimes like I'll go on Google and search something, and like how on the top of the search results they'll sometimes have like the AI answers for whatever you're searching for. If I don't get that, I'll like redo the search so that I get one of those, because I'm like, I don't even want to dig through all of those websites. Like I just want you to tell me the answer. But I think it's a really interesting time to see how all of this, how AI integrates more into people's lives. I know Chris and I talk about this a lot, and I talk about it with a lot of the people that are just in my family and friends, which is I think like we don't really fully understand how AI is going to be built into everything yet, and because we actually engage with it a lot, we are sort of in this like echo chamber where we think like everybody uses it on a daily basis, but the reality is most people, like 90% of like the worldwide population, have never even touched any sort of AI, right? They've never used like ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these different AI platforms. And so it's interesting. Like I always feel like we're sort of behind the ball or like behind the curve with AI. It moves so fast. I feel like I'm constantly behind. But then I think about, the average person just really hasn't used it. And it makes me actually think back to like the early days of crypto when it's like, oh my God, there's a new coin every day. I'm so behind. I don't know what to invest in. And the reality is like most people, even now, don't really know much about crypto. And what they do understand is very surface level, right? Like they just get like, oh, it's internet cash or something, right? But they don't understand like what's happening technically in the background. So I think that's really interesting. Is like, have you ever thought about that? Like, what do you think it's going to look like in 10 years? Like, how do you think people are going to be using AI on a regular basis?
Yeah, AI in 10 years is tough to predict because it has changed so much. Like, even just the difference from like GPT 3.5 to now is immense. To where like back then you would ask it something and 1 or 2 out of 5 times it would be wrong. To nowadays, the amount of stuff it can do is incredible. So yeah, I don't really know in that aspect, but in terms of comparing it with that moment in crypto that was kind of early on is similar to that, but I also think it's a bit more prolific than cryptocurrency, because there's also, even though cryptocurrency has come a long way since that time, like we'll say 2017, 2018, it's still not something that everyone touches, because they may not have money to invest in it. They may not know the utility. They may be scared of it, any of those things. I think a better analogy would probably be like email, because email is something that's even more prolific and it's free essentially. Or another comparison would be like social media, is that both of those things provide utility, they're free, and they're prolific, so a whole bunch of people can use them. And because of that, we can kind of take a look at how those have gone. So like, what is email now? Well, essentially it's just spam and some messages. So is that what AI is going to turn into? It's possible, because, you know, some of them want to push. I love the commercial. I think it was a Super Bowl commercial or something where they were talking about advertising on AI. And it was, you know, some guy asked AI what he should write to his mother or something like that. And it gave him like a whole bunch of suggestions. And then if that doesn't work, you can contact like overagedcougars.com and find another thing like that. It's like, be careful of advertising in AI. And so I think that that's definitely a possibility as to where it could go, because when things are free, which not all AI is free, but they do have free tiers of it. When things are free, the company it isn't free. It's just they're using you and your data and all of that to compensate for it. And essentially you're paying more for free services, but it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah. It makes me think about like one of the things that you mentioned with the email, and I forget the other example that you're saying, but one of the things that made me think about was just that the difference also, I think, with crypto is that there wasn't as much institutional and government adoption early on. Like we're just getting to that point, whereas AI sort of like formed out of institutional and like, you know, ChatGPT or OpenAI came out of Elon Musk, which essentially not like came out of him. He didn't birth it physically, but you know, he was like the brainchild of it to some extent. And so like there was a lot of money behind it from the beginning, right? And governments already are fully utilizing this, right? So I totally get that. My brain always goes to like the malicious intent with AI. Like I always think about how kids now are engaging with AI, and basically everything that they do or tell AI is being tracked and monitored. And like, we don't really know. There's a, you know, dark curtain there that these companies have so much data about people, and people are very willing to divulge information to AI that they wouldn't divulge to other people or even necessarily like Google search for, right? There's this like false sense of security, I think, with that. So I always think about that with like 10 years down the road. And like, I really think there is so much potential for abuse, especially in advertising, right? So, yeah.
I am curious though. So you said, you know, the acceptance of AI has been obviously so much more than crypto. And I mean, crypto's been around for, you know, a good while now. I mean, at least 10 years, right? It's been kind of in the mainstream. Do you think it's because of like the technical barrier, or do you think it's because of, you know, maybe the numerous of times people have gotten scammed from it, or, you know, just does it still have that kind of stank on its shoulder, or it's not been, you know, it's not been able to be fully like consumerized, right? In like a natural market where like your mom would use it.
There's a whole bunch of things that come into it, but I think probably one of the biggest aspects is what you mentioned last, not fully marketed, because you don't go everywhere and they have options for paying in cryptocurrency yet. And, you know, it's not as easy as paying in cash or paying with a credit card yet. And so I think those are barriers, but also I think, and I'm not sure, I don't have the data to back this up, but I think a large majority of people who invest in cryptocurrency are considered, in terms of income, considered like middle class and up, because they have disposable income that they can essentially gamble on something. It's not a gamble after you know what you're doing, but in the beginning, it is a gamble. And this is true for me, and I think for everybody else, is you're just betting on something that will turn out well. You have no idea. I mean, when I got into Bitcoin, somebody who said, if you have one Bitcoin, you'll be set for life. And I was like, well, that sounds awesome. And what have I got to lose? You know? And essentially, I think that's how most people get into cryptocurrency. And then you do like the hashtag study Bitcoin thing that I noticed they stopped doing as the market goes down, which is hilarious. But but now then you start studying it and you realize that, like, compared with pretty much with fiat currency and all these other things, like, it still does incredibly well over time. And so I think that's probably the main obstacle, is like we forget that most of the world is not earning a middle class or higher salary. And so all of these people, they don't have the spare money to do it. They don't have, and in their day-to-day life, they're probably paying with cash. And so it just doesn't have that adoption yet. But I think how it's going to gain that is we're going to see that eventually all these shenanigans with money printing are going to catch up with us. I know myself personally, and a lot of other people I talk to, have really felt the effect of inflation after COVID. Like there was COVID, they printed a bunch of money, gave everybody $2,000 for free, and then all of a sudden now everything is at least twice as expensive. And so, like, we're feeling that, and it's probably going to keep on going that way. And then people will look back, because I remember, like, before I got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, we saw the Bitcoin ATMs, and I was talking with Russ about this, and we were like, man, isn't that thing that there's only like a certain amount of? Like, what do you think's going to happen when they run out of them? And we had no idea what was going on with it. But eventually that's the type of thing that's going to happen, is there's only so many of them, but everything else they're printing, and there's no mathematical way that it can't go to $1 million and $20 million and $100 million and $1 billion for Bitcoin. Mathematically, that's guaranteed. We just need to make sure it's secure, essentially.
Yeah. You got me thinking about this recent sort of news. It literally happened, I think, like, the articles came out like today and yesterday about this new proposal for a fork of Bitcoin called eCash. And it's proposed by one of the Bitcoin developers, I may be saying this wrong, but Paul Stork. Yeah. And so I've actually been reading a lot about it today, trying to understand it a little more. I mean, we've seen other Bitcoin forks in the past, like Bcash and Bitcoin SV and whatever. And so I did some research, and I'm curious, like, your opinion. I'll explain it a little bit for anybody who's watching and hasn't really done much research on it. But essentially, the proposal is this fork of Bitcoin that would happen in August of 2026. And it's going to add basically like smart contract functionality to Bitcoin, or like layer 2 functionality, in the sense of what can now happen. Now, let me be clear, because I think there's like a lot of misconception in this. Nothing that I explain right now affects the actual Bitcoin blockchain at all. This is like a hard fork. So it's essentially like taking the previous Bitcoin blockchain, creating a whole new blockchain with that same history, but then applying new rules to that blockchain that don't touch the original blockchain. But essentially what would happen with this new one is adding what's called drive chains, which allow people to stake. I'm going to call it eCash instead of Bitcoin, so it's not confusing, but stake eCash, and then create like a new fork off of that could be like a smart contract or DeFi protocol, essentially. And if that chain dies or doesn't work out, it's like sort of in an escrow, so that money can just continue like down the path of where it was, down that ledger chain as it was going. But I think one of the most interesting parts about this is that the developer, Paul Stork, and I'm going to inject some of my opinion here, but he's kind of hyping this up by saying that with the fork, they're going to move some portion of Satoshi's coins, about 500,000 of the like 1.1 million, to miners. And that's because the rules of how this blockchain is mined is I guess delegated is a little bit different. So I'm curious, like, your thoughts on this. I know you probably don't have like a ton of background knowledge of it because it's very new. But like, you've seen the other forks of Bitcoin. So I'm curious, like, what your opinion is. Like, were those worthwhile? And like, you know, like, is this something that's worth even putting energy into? Should we even be talking about this at this point?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely worthwhile to talk about, and it is very confusing because I still remember the Bitcoin Cash fork that occurred, and that wasn't too long after I got into cryptocurrency myself, and I was very confused about what it meant. And so, essentially, everyone who has a Bitcoin before the fork will receive after the fork occurs, we'll have a Bitcoin, and we'll also have whatever new thing is. In this case, they're going to call it eCash or
eCash, yeah,
whatever they're going to call it. So it's not like you lose anything after the fork, but essentially, Bitcoin has always been the money of the people in that its future depends on which people believe in that path the most, and that actually provides a security for Bitcoin as well, because they have what's called a 51% attack, where if you can own 51% of the computing resources that secure the blockchain, you essentially own the blockchain. You choose which direction it goes. And so that's essentially very difficult to do at this point, because it's one of the reasons that it works is it's more costly than actual value held on the blockchain usually. So in knowing that, with these forks, the first idea that the first thing that came to my head when I saw about this fork is it's setting a very bad precedent, essentially taking Bitcoin away from Satoshi. Because number one, we don't know who it is definitively. We have very good ideas who it could be, and that person may not be alive anymore. But even so, the whole concept of Bitcoin is that you own your money. And so taking it away from somebody else is setting a very bad precedent. Now, that being said, there are kind of scenarios where it might make sense to have a Bitcoin fork that in essence takes away money from other people. Like, for instance, people talk about quantum computing and like, is Bitcoin secure for the post-quantum era? And so if there was something where quantum computers, they were able to capture all of the data and get people's private keys and things like that, well, in that sense, once they owned all of the Bitcoin, it might make sense to fork Bitcoin pre that happening and then reassign a new chain. So it might make sense in certain scenarios where there are bad actors behind it, but to take somebody's property in this sense, I think it sets a really bad precedent. Now, that being said, it's also really confusing because with this fork, there's two things going on, right? So they're talking about the drive chains, which is a very cool idea, but then they're also talking about taking away someone's property, and they're both going on simultaneously. Yeah. So it might be it's challenging, because I guess with everything with politics, that's the way it is. It's challenging. Me personally, I wouldn't be for it, because I think it just sets a really bad precedent. Like, all of a sudden, they're going to be, somebody does something stupid and they get canceled, and then all of a sudden, well, let's fork Bitcoin and take their Bitcoin away. So it's just like a really bad. I don't support it, at least as far as I know about it, because I think it just opens the door for all types of craziness. But that being said, taking a look at the past Bitcoin forks, they weren't successful in that they didn't become the dominant fork, even though people at the time thought they would. Like Roger Ver with the Bitcoin Cash fork, he was sure that his fork would become the dominant fork, but it didn't. And same thing with Satoshi's vision. They were sure that was going to become the dominant fork. It didn't. So it doesn't mean that this new one in the future won't, but it just means that, well, what happens with Bitcoin forks, generally they happen, people sell it, and then it goes on into oblivion.
I also heard this sort of argument that I thought was interesting, where I think there's novelty in it because we're developers. Like, the idea here is that they're testing out a proposed bit 300 and bit 301, which is like essentially new rules. And in order for them to institute those, everybody who is a miner has to agree to that, right? And it's nearly impossible for that to happen on the actual Bitcoin blockchain. And so that's sort of why, like, it's almost like a sandbox for these new like rules, right? Which I think is interesting. But I agree with you. It definitely sets a really bad precedent. And like my two thoughts when I was researching it was, well, if they can do that to Satoshi, what's to stop them from doing that to anyone else, right? And really the reality is like it's those decisions are going to be led by the company who's doing it. I forget the name now. Like who Paul Stork is part of, but those decisions would be led. That governance would be led between him and the miners, right? And then the second thing that kind of I thought was an interesting proposal, which I'm curious your thoughts on, was like these forks they sound essentially like a money grab at retail money, because essentially for them to have any value, like you can fork Bitcoin all you want. You could do it tomorrow and fork it and just run it on your own computer. It doesn't like mean that there's value in that. But in order for this eCash to have any monetary value, like actual like fiat value, somebody has to buy it, right? Somebody has to buy the eCash. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, is like somebody I was talking to was talking about how this is kind of a grab at retail investors, right? Who don't understand what's going on, right? And I think we could kind of see the same for Bcash, right? Because there's still people to this day who are like, Bitcoin Cash is where it's at. Like, this is so much better. I mean, I went to ETH Denver like a month and a half ago, and there were people there who were wearing like Bitcoin Cash shirts and stuff, right? And so there's value to them. But like when the fork happened, you know, Bitcoin and Bcash were like the same value, like on paper, but then like the values, that monetary fiat values, diverge very quickly. And so, like, what do you think? Is this like, do you think this is just like another cash grab by a developer who's like, I can just make a bunch of money from proposing these drive chains, and maybe I can get some retail investors to buy my coins or buy Satoshi's coins?
I think there definitely is kind of an ego part to it, because I mean, at least this is the third major fork that I know about, and all of them was tied to a person, you know? And so it does seem like it is kind of a big ego thing. And while they were all, you know, early Bitcoin adopters and influential people at the very early times of Bitcoin, they were just one person. And Bitcoin was developed, you know, essentially by a lot of different people, and some of them we don't even know who they are. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm a bit confused that he would want to take away Satoshi's coins. You know, it doesn't add up to me. And so, yeah, I really don't get it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I wouldn't really have that much faith in it in the future. I think maybe the technology, that could be useful, but I'm not exactly sure. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much, other than Satoshi's property. It doesn't matter that much which Bitcoin is going to be Bitcoin, because it's kind of like a name brand recognition type of thing. It's not going to be like whether the Bitcoin we know or the eCash is the one that's called Bitcoin in the future. That doesn't matter as much. But I think the main thing for me is just taking away Bitcoin from Satoshi, because it's, you know, what, like, I'm thinking, what's going to happen from them taking away Bitcoin from Michael Saylor? You know,
right.
He's a big, like, he's next. So somebody's going to propose a fork for that. And what, you know, it just is dangerous territory.
Yeah. Once you kind of open up that Pandora's box there, right? It's like, well, you did it once. What's stopping you from kind of doing it again? Right. You touched on one thing that I think a lot of people have actually been talking about. I was watching a little bit of the Bitcoin conference in Vegas today, and one of the panels, and, you know, I know we've kind of talked about it in the past, was around quantum. So, you know, I don't want to drift too far because it is like I think it's a whole episode kind of on its own, but, you know, it is. But what is your kind of general consensus when it does come to quantum? You know, some of the recent discoveries that they've had with Google and everything like that, and then with Bitcoin and what people are trying to do to kind of prevent it from affecting.
Quantum's difficult because we think it's a threat in the future, but it's actually, most of it is occurring right now, because essentially what the nation states and the bad actors are doing is something called harvest now, decrypt later. So they're capturing all of the traffic that's going on, all of the traffic that they can. Right now, that stuff is encrypted with secure algorithms. Like you'll see on your web browser when you go to a website, HTTPS, the S is for secure. And so right now it's secure because to break that encryption, it would take a lot of time and a lot of resources. But with quantum computing, they're thinking, well, 10 years in the future, that's probably not going to be that hard. So they're doing this harvest now, decrypt later, where right now they're capturing as much traffic as they can and just putting it in these data centers where they can just hold it in storage. Well, in 10 years, when quantum computing is a lot easier, a lot less expensive, things like that, they're going to go through all of this traffic and break the encryption. And it's not anything new because all encryption essentially gets broken, but we just thought that this stuff was going to be like secure for a lot longer. So at that point, when they break it in 10 years or however long it takes, they're going to have access to all of the secrets that we have right now, or maybe not all the secrets, but a lot of the secrets. And if those secrets are still thought to be protecting something, well, then they'll have access to those secrets. And if those secrets happen to be some type of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency related secrets, well, all of a sudden there's a huge wealth transfer. And so this is one of the scenarios where actually having a Bitcoin fork might be useful, because if that happens at that point, we could fork Bitcoin or whatever blockchain is necessary. You could fork it at that point before the quantum computing or encryption is broken. And before that point, you can go back to that point and start again from that moment. So I think that would be kind of a useful time when a fork would be needed to protect people, protect the property owners. But there are ways that they've mentioned, I think they're called Schnorr signatures or something, where they can make Bitcoin quantum resistant. But I definitely think it's something we need to be very concerned about, because quantum computing is happening and the attacks are happening as we speak, whereas they're just stealing all the data and holding it. So it is happening, but it's one of those things where as an individual, you can't do much more about it than figure out where do you have valuable secrets that could be decrypted in 5-10 years.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how you would protect those. And even at that point, so I went to a cybersecurity conference, I think like 2 or 3 months ago, where they were talking about this, and they don't even have answers for it. So the professionals in the field don't even know the answer for it. So it's just something that is useful to be aware of at this point, and then stay abreast of the topic, essentially.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard that from anyone else. The idea of harvesting this data now and encrypting it later, and I think it's something that like pretty much nobody talks about. Which it made me think too, with like going back to the eCash thing, which is kind of funny. Is like the fork thing is supposed to be a feature, not like it's designed actually on purpose, I think, into Bitcoin, right? The idea of Bitcoin is that all of the miners of Bitcoin have to come to a consensus to change the rules of how it works, right? And by having it decentralized, it means that people really have to believe in a change in order to make it happen, right? Because it's infinite, like it gets increasingly more difficult as the network gets bigger. And as decentralization gets bigger, right? Because right now, a lot of Bitcoin mining is not really that decentralized either. But it's interesting to think about the idea of the fork, right? Because that's such a powerful thing. Even if, there was some quantum breakthrough where we were able to break the encryption of Bitcoin, that could totally happen and everyone could lose their coins, but then we could like literally just step back in time to before that happened and fork the blockchain from there, right? And I think that's the feature that's built in. Whereas it sounds like Paul Stork and Roger Ver and like these other people were taking like this feature that's actually meant for security and trying to like kind of profit off of it. So I like that perspective of kind of what you're saying, where it's there for a reason, right? We're able to fork the blockchain for a reason, but it's not so that we can steal Satoshi's coins. And I think that's like an interesting thing too, because it dilutes the total supply of Bitcoin too, right? Like everybody's coins get more valuable as people lose them and as they get locked away. And like every time, like, this might be mean, but like it's kind of nice when you hear about people who like lost their hard drive or something, right? That had like thousands of Bitcoin on it, because it's like, cool. Now there's not 21 million. There's probably like 18 or 17 million, right? And so that just makes the value higher. But then when you just take all these coins that have been locked for a long time and just distribute them, it's like there's more supply of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of what you're mentioning there goes back to what Chris was talking about, which is one of the things that's going to get adoption. And I think it's probably going to be some type of event like that, because you guys remember during COVID trying to find toilet paper anywhere. It just didn't exist because it was, it was the most crazy thing, because you would go into like Walmart or Target and the shelves were stocked everywhere except for the toilet paper aisle. They were just like empty. There was like tumbleweeds going across there. And so it's like once people realize that something is limited in supply, everybody wants to get their own. And right now, Bitcoin doesn't feel limited in supply, because you can go to any exchange, you can go wherever you want, and you could buy it. But essentially, that's not going to happen, because we've mined almost all of it, and a lot of it is just in cold storage, not being traded, not liquid. And essentially, the liquid Bitcoin is going, like all of the people who have had Bitcoin for a long time, they're not going to be selling it anymore, because for one reason or another. And so at that point, when it gets more difficult to actually acquire, then it's going to be something. And simultaneously, because of that, because of supply and demand, the price is going to skyrocket at that point, just because you can't buy it anywhere. All of a sudden, that's going to draw a lot more attention. That's going to draw a lot more people into it. And I think that's going to probably be the event that's going to make everyone on Earth realize that, hey, this is something big. And we've seen like mini things of it, where like every 4 years or so there's been a bull run. So we've seen like little examples of it where there's the frenzy, but I don't think we've seen like the true frenzy, because same thing that happened with like I think it was the Weimar Republic or something in Germany, where they were just printing a ton of money and the money devalues. Same thing in Venezuela, where the money just devalues. Same thing is going to happen with Western fiat currencies and different things like that, where all of a sudden it just devalues completely because they've printed masses of it. But Bitcoin won't, because there's only 21 million.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, like with the money printing, because I think at this point, especially in like Western cultures, we have, I don't know what the number is now, like 30 trillion in debt or something like that. It's projected to be like 60 trillion in like 5 years. Like, I don't know how governments are able to keep kicking the can down the road of like being like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And people believe that, because at some point that like something will break, and like that small thing will cascade into everything. And I think that's when, like what you're saying, the true sort of Bitcoin adoption will happen, and it'll be fast, probably.
And we felt it. Like, I don't remember inflation having an effect my whole entire life until COVID. Like, prices went up very, very small. Even like, I think the biggest thing with money that I noticed changing was the amount that you tip. Because when I was a kid, it was like 5% and then 8%. And now it's like 50% or something like that. So like, I think that's the only other thing for kind of inflated.
150%.
I know, right? It's like you bought a stick of gum and you tip them $20.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But it's like, after COVID, the effect of that was like a very, very drastic effect. And I think once people
Yeah.
feel that and that starts being a very real thing, all of a sudden they're going to try and find these safer harbors like Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's interesting too because the effects of that inflation affected a younger generation who holds less wealth, so they notice it more too. I mean, I agree with you. I think in my lifetime, I've never experienced that much inflation that fast. And if we're headed in the same direction, like it's not like we're not still using a ton of money and printing a ton of money, right? It's just they're cloaking. It's smoke and mirrors right now is what's happening, and I think at some point the magic show is going to end and everything's going to come crashing down.
Well, there's a really interesting thing I kind of heard today, which, you know, with traditional finance, you know, obviously there's trillions of dollars that are kind of in that market and everything like that. But when you think about it, like the generation that still believes in, you know, or I say still believes, but, you know, is more involved in more of the traditional finance, you know, is the older generation, right? So they don't really believe as much in Bitcoin because it's, you know, it's for the younger bucks, right? But millennials, Gen Z, they hold more cryptocurrency and they kind of see the intrinsic kind of value of it. So I think as a longer play, I mean, it's just natural that maybe more traditional finance will go away and all of that will just shift as the generation comes up and the older generation goes away, all flows right back into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So
no, that's a really good point. And it'll probably happen kind of later than people expect, because the transfer of wealth, like generally people inherit money when they're in their 60s based on like data from whoever takes that data. So these millennials and Gen Zs are going to be really, really old when they inherit this money that they're all of a sudden going to put into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So that'll probably be, you know, 20, 30 years in the future that occurs, but it'll be a big transition of wealth.
Yeah. That'll be interesting if there's like, you know, Bitcoin slowly makes its way up to like $1 million, but then like once we all hit 60, it becomes like $100 million because we just all get this wealth.
It could very well happen, and that's like one of the codes, because right now it looks like Bitcoin is kind of like slowing down on this log curve, but it could just be changing from like an x squared to an x cubed curve, like a sigmoid curve, where it does slow down for a while in the center, but then all of a sudden it takes off, and that could be kind of the triggering event.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that before, and I like that take a lot too, right? Because it makes a lot of sense with the wealth transfer. Like I don't think people realize that, but like you don't inherit, you know, your parents' wealth until they die, which is like 80, and that means that you'll be late 50s, early 60s, right? So it does make a lot of sense. We talked a little bit about like trading, and I want to get into another topic that I think is really interesting, which is Gemini, the exchange, not the LLM, just launched Agentic. I know it's going to be very confusing, but they just launched Agentic trading, so you can trade on Gemini with Gemini, with your LLM.
Gemini Inception.
Yeah, it's Gemini Inception. But so basically, what this is like now they're creating this like toolkit so that anybody, like a retail trader, can connect their AI models, their ChatGPT, their Claude, their Gemini, to an MCP server, which then allows them to allow their agents to trade on their behalf on the Gemini exchange. And so I think this opens up, one, I think it's really cool, like futuristic technology, and it opens up like a lot of really awesome things, and then a lot of like kind of scary things to me too. Before we like dig into those, I'm curious, like, do you have any initial thoughts on those, Randall and Chris? Like, I'm curious, because Chris, I know you're like deep in the AI sector, and so I'm curious, like, what are like both your thoughts on this? Like, what are the risks? What are the pros and cons of agentic trading?
Yeah, well, I would be very hesitant about it, just because it's still brand new technology, and we don't know what's going to happen with it. So, you know, here, I mean, here's the kind of my view of a lot of trading is that it is gambling often, where people take the whole amount that they have to trade with, and they'll just, you know, put it all on red or put it all on black and just hope. And you hear the stories about the guy who put it all on red or black and they struck and all of a sudden they make a lot of money. But that's the one out of a million people, whereas the other 999,999 people, they all lost. And you don't hear their stories because those stories, nobody really cares.
They don't make good headlines.
Yeah, exactly. They don't make good headlines. And so while I think agentic trading could be very cool because you could actually have it do stuff that you want to do. I mean, there were a lot of like basically bots that would trade how you wanted to trade. So it's not that far from bot trading, but it's kind of like smart bot trading. And so essentially it seems like a good idea, but it could be used by less experienced traders as kind of a gamble and essentially a way to lose all of their money. And then, because I think, you know, like everybody needs to lose once or twice. That's just like part of being a trader. When you talk with veteran traders, and they've all have those like losses that they have and they stick with you. But the thing is, in order to become a good trader, you need to like learn from that and then move forward. But oftentimes what happens, I think, with the more gambling type of person is they lose and then they just, you know what, that whole cryptocurrency thing, that's not good. So then they move on to the next
one.
Like, let me go to the horse track or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think there's two sides of it where trading is very emotional. And I think if you can have an agent, they kind of take the emotion out of it, right? Where it's
definitely
statistically, this is the right thing to do, where you're like, no, it's down 40%. We need to sell it right now, you know? So I think that is one thing that will be really interesting to see. But like you said, we've had bots, we've had algorithms and trading algorithms for the dawn of time that have been able to kind of do this stuff. So it's like adding this quote unquote intelligent, you know, kind of process and injecting it in there is kind of interesting for more on the fly, I guess you could say, trading, you know, to kind of do a quick analysis of what happened in the last 15 minutes and then let's do a prediction of what's going to happen in the next 5 is definitely a use case. But also, too, I think, you know, kind of what Randall was saying, it's the experience. And I think this is a lot of the time that, you know, anybody just using AI just in general, they may not have the experience or the knowledge of how to do the thing. And then they just expect AI to do the thing. And that doesn't usually happen at the end of the day. So it's like a really good experienced trader could take AI, inject their methods and workflows and have it work, you know, 9 out of 10 times. And then someone who's new can try to do the same thing and it will lose every time. So, you know.
Yeah, like they're going to be like, trade Bitcoin, make me money, no mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Another thing is you always need to look at like the incentive behind it. So like, while it seems like Gemini is probably offering this for, you know, the better of society and the betterment of crypto traders, more likely the reason that they're offering it is because they want to be the first people who offered agentic AI trading, and because their shareholders want to make more money. And really there's only 2 people who regularly win in trading. One is the exchanges and 2 is the government. The exchanges because you have to pay for every transaction, and the government because you have to pay taxes on every transaction. So like they're the only ones who consistently win when it comes to trading. Everybody else, it is kind of like gambling, but if you're more skilled with it, it can be, it's like you're a card counter at a casino as opposed to somebody who's just playing without knowing what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some interesting thoughts about this. Like, I definitely think that's one of the main, like, really cool parts is that if you do have experience as a trader, you can do a few more like novel trades, or like, like things that people wouldn't really think of. And I can think of like one example. The other day I saw this like X post and it was like, this person turned $500 into like $1 million in 12 hours or something, right? And I was like, I literally like screenshotted this, threw it in AI, and I was like, what actually happened here? Like, give me like the real like what like yeah, it's a headline, but like what really happened? And apparently, this person saw Elon Musk tweet something about a cryptocurrency and bought it like 8 minutes after he tweeted, and he was one of the first, you know, people to get in it, and then it just ran up because of his tweet, right? And so I think there's more novel trades that you can do like that, where it's like you have an AI bot follow, and this is just an example, but like follow Elon Musk. It's like anytime that he talks about a coin, just trade that coin, right? And it's something that like I'm not going to sit there and just watch Elon Musk's tweets all day, but I could train a bot to do that and make a lot of money from that, right? It's pretty crazy, right?
It just reminds me of you remember the McCaffrey, the whole like things that he was doing where he was calling out coins. I think, what was this, in 2021, I want to say, and he would call out coins and then they would pump for like 30 seconds. And I remember, oh my God, I was so excited. One of the coins I was holding, he called out that day, and I'm like, yeah, I see it pumping. I'm like going to try to sell and I can't sell. And it's just stuck. And then all of a sudden just dumped right there. I was like, oh God. Yeah.
And that's kind of the interesting thing too with AI is like you can be like, I need you to sell this, right? So it can like increase slippage or do, different things that like we probably couldn't do as fast to like get you in and out of those trades. But I think, those are the sort of things that crypto relies on. I saw this other thing too, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, wait, one more thing before you forget, Russ. But there also needs to be guardrails, because AI, even though it can do things potentially to sell it faster, it could also do things that we would consider stupid to sell it faster, where it's like, yeah, I just sold it for $0.00 because you said you wanted me to sell it when they did it, and I did that. And so that's one thing we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, like I can't tell you how many times I've asked AI to do something, and it's because of my prompt was just lazy, right? Where I'm like, just make me a logo, and it's like, here's a logo, and it looks like crap, right? And so like that same thing could definitely happen with agentic trading. We're like, make sure you sell this at like whatever, and it's like, sold it for $0, right? And so that brings up like an interesting thing too, right? Which is, who's at fault there? Like, do these LLMs become at fault? Because like we all know, and I don't, people who are watching who may be experienced with AI know that they move the dials behind the scenes all the time, right? So it's like there's a model that's like really, really intelligent, and then the next day it's like really dumb because they tweaked some little thing, the system prompt or like temperature or whatever it is. And so like, I know the answer to this like realistically, but like, should we hold those AIs accountable? Obviously they're gonna be like, no, you opted in, right? But it puts a lot of that risk on the people who are trading who don't understand what's actually going on.
Well, it's going to be part of the 500-page contract you need to sign in order to use agentic trading. It's going to be like the accept and continue type of thing. It scrolls forever, and then in order to do it, you have to click accept and continue. So you're just going to click that without thinking. But yeah, that kind of goes back to my thought in the beginning, is like, it's dangerous early on. There's potential. I mean, there's potential if you can use this technology reliably, you could outtrade other traders. And if you're one of the first people to do it, like using the technique you were talking about, Ross, you could be you could make a lot of money, but you could also lose a lot of money because you're doing it in the beginning. So it's one of those things where like, it's worthwhile to hedge your bets, where like, if you have $1,000 to trade, you don't trade all 1,000 of it. You trade maybe like 50 and try it.
it definitely opens up like more opportunity for scams too, right? Because like enough, if enough people are doing trades, like that's a novel idea, right? Like, oh, just have an AI follow Elon Musk and trade whatever he does, right? But then like enough people do that, and then malicious people start learning about that, and they're like, cool, I'll make fake news headlines and spam them to LLMs or whatever, however that would happen,
Reddit,
and then they can trade, yeah, like exactly, like throw a bunch of stuff on Reddit, and all of a sudden, they can manipulate markets that way. So, it's this is the kind of stuff that I'm just so interested in seeing how it plays out, right? I saw this thing the other day that was like, it was like the top earning companies for Q1 in crypto, and they're all pretty much prediction markets like Polymarket, Kalshi, Robinhood predictions. And I posted on this tweet, I was like, basically this means, the only people left in crypto are degenerate gamblers, which is like, it's kind of what they've always been all along. It's just like, they're not gambling on coins anymore. They're gambling on like, I don't know how many cars pass through a stop sign or something in a certain amount of time. Like these weird, and that's like what's trending now. So I'm curious, like, you think that AI trading will bring some of that like enthusiasm back to the markets, or do you think it's just like another gimmick that Gemini is using to get more trading volume and be the first to do it? And like we all know that it's not just Gemini. Binance was going to have it tomorrow, and all the other ones too.
Yeah, the only thing that really brings people back to the markets is FOMO. So like once things start going up consistently, reliably, and then you look back, and because like this is every bull cycle. I've heard some version of this story where somebody's like, "Man, I was at this party and this dude put like this much money into this cryptocurrency. Now he has this much money." And it's like, why didn't I think to do that? Do you think if I put in money now, like it'll still work? That's happened every single bull cycle. I've heard like a version of that story. So I think it is like FOMO that draws people in, and they hear these stories about people who made money. And, that's why I was saying in the beginning, like the down or the sideways portions seem a lot longer than the up portions, because the up portion lasts for like 6 months max. But like the down portion goes on for 3 years-ish, 3.5 years. Something like that.
So there is I know with the trading and AI, that's kind of been, the newest thing that's come out. And there's been another kind of sector that has where AI and crypto has been kind of converging at this point, and that's the X402 kind of payment protocol. And I want to say this was already implemented like last year from Coinbase, and then they gave it over to the Linux Foundation. But, it seems to be getting a little bit more popular. And, I wanted to get your kind of thoughts on this, where we would now see, I want to say they said it would be a $30 trillion market by possibly 2030 once you have AI agents actually with their own crypto wallets being able to do transactions, make deals, buy services, buy data, whatever they need to do. And there's this concept that crypto was actually made for AI agents. It was never really made for humans, but the perfect use case is AI agents.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. It could be. I mean, aside from Satoshi just being smart enough to create Bitcoin, maybe he knew that AI was coming, and he predicted. Maybe he's actually someone from the future who came back, and that's why
Most likely
he's dead, because he went back to the future. That's a possibility.
Yeah. His name is Marty Fly.
I think, yeah, I've seen that movie. I've seen that movie, yeah. But it does make a lot of sense. And while you were saying that, that could be another use case for the, or another reason for this like sigmoid type curve that I was talking about with the price, where right now it seems like it's stalling because AI use hasn't been implemented. But once all those transactions are going on, because I mentioned earlier that how like adoption with humans is kind of stalled because people can't use it every day. But AI can use it every day and can use it multiple times every day and can do all types of payments. Like, I mean, this was something that I was looking up just recently that kind of bothers me is like, if you're looking for music, you can pretty much go to one place and get all of your music. Like you go to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and you can pretty much find all of the music that you want. But if you want to watch a TV show or a movie, you have you go to Netflix. No, they don't have it. You go to Hulu. No, they don't have it. You go to like Apple TV or whatever. No, they don't have it. You go to Amazon. No, they don't have it. And it's like, you got to go to all these different things. So I was like, why does that happen? And it's because, with each with music, it's usually like, the person who creates it and the production company. Whereas with movies, there's a whole bunch of more people involved and like a whole bunch of complex payouts depending upon where it was and all these different things. But potentially that could be a great use case for AI where all of a sudden you can have this one movie place or one TV show place where you can watch all of your stuff and they can do all these microtransactions that humans are just too lazy to do. So I think that could, what you were mentioning there, Chris, that could be a brilliant idea for cryptocurrency, and actually getting that fully implemented could make our lives easier. I'm hoping mine in particular, where I can just go to one place and watch all of these movies. But yeah,
it's a really interesting concept to think about. Like if, that one place could just be ChatGPT, right? Where you could be like, hey, ChatGPT, I want to watch like South Park episode, whatever. And it's like, cool, it's going to cost this much per minute. Are you okay with that? And then it can just pay using X402. And you don't have to think about any of that. I think that's the one of the coolest things. I know like Chris and I have been talking about this a little bit recently, where it's like, if I can talk with my chatbot and like order a pizza from Telegram and it already knows all my information, so it can just like have that delivered to my house, right? And handle all the payments and everything. Like, I think a lot of people would use that. And you start to incorporate other things like what you're saying, right? It's like anything that you want to engage with as a human, you can basically, instead of going on Google, like how we started this conversation, I would hate doing that. It's like, just talk to your agent, let them figure out all the connections behind the scenes. I think that's definitely where we're headed, right? And yeah, like what you're saying with the adoption curve, like it makes a ton of sense that once that stuff starts happening, it's sort of limitless when people realize, okay, I can just talk to my agent and I don't have to sort for anything. And it'll be interesting to see how these companies fight it too, right? Because Netflix is not just going to go down easy, like, but maybe they step into that realm too. Good. Go ahead, Chris.
It's an interesting concept too, because it's almost like I know there's some word for it. I can't think of it, where everything kind of has to be in place for it to actually work, right? Where everything prior, so, crypto had to be, rolled out the way it did in order to lay this kind of foundation, or it never really would have worked. Where I say this, like having the world really truly be borderless when it came with payments and AI agents to actually transact. So, one idea is that I think about is, imagine you deal with furniture and you build furniture, and, you can only really deal with American companies or European companies. But now if you have your AI agent, they can go out to a China lumberyard or something, right? And be able to negotiate with their agent on that, and then have that payment be instant, right? Without having to deal with all of the currency. And then what was the other? You might have to remind me, Russ. It was about the concept of even having Bitcoin be able to be almost like the stable reserve, as opposed to like USD, where it can then be transferred into these different coins. So,
I think that has a lot to do with like how governments now, if you look at China, they used to hold like a ton, like I think they were the biggest holder of US bonds, and now they basically sold off most of that and they just hold gold, right? Because they know that the US currency is probably going to fail sometime in the next, 10 minutes or so. So like, no, but I think that's, yeah, like, and the other thing that I was just thinking when you said that too is like, not only does AI allow that cross-border negotiation, but it's cross language too, right? Like where that person at the lumber yard doesn't have to be an English speaker. They can speak their native language to their AI, and you can have like a realistic, well thought out, negotiated conversation in different languages, in different currencies, and have, Bitcoin as the base currency because it's slow. That's also, I think, a good part of it, right? It doesn't need to be fast, but it's stable and it's well trusted, right? And I think that's, to loop back into like the eCash thing, it's like that's one of the things that I think they're missing here is that in order for any cryptocurrency to really last, they have to build trust, right? We've seen, I know, Randall, I'm sure you've seen this, like how many cryptocurrencies have come and gone because of shady business, right? Bitcoin stays around because of trust. And so you start off a new fork of Bitcoin with this like shady, not trustworthy thing, like taking somebody's property. It's not a good way to start something that's going to last. So yeah, I think there's just so much potential here. And it's why I love this space of like the crossover of crypto and AI. And I don't think a lot of people are actually talking about this yet. I know when I was at ETH Denver, like they were starting to talk about AI agents who have access to wallets, but it's mostly between developers because developers like actually are interested in this stuff and how it all works and like the risks involved with that, right? And I like what you were saying too, Randall, with the guardrails. Like I think that's the thing that all of this has to have in order to work is how do we allow AI to do everything we want it to do and nothing of what we don't want it to do. And I think that's really the toughest part right now because it's non-deterministic. Like you don't know what kind of output you're going to get.
Yeah. So, Randall, I just have kind of one more question for you. So your first video was Bitcoin 500,000. Do you still hold true to that bullish claim 8 years ago?
Well, so here's the interesting thing is that when I made that video, there was like, I think it was like when McAfee was saying Bitcoin is going to go to $500,000 within this certain time, or I'll eat my member on live TV, and but like Bitcoin was at $2,000 ish at that time, and the thought that it could go up that high was kind of like not on the border of not possible. Essentially, it was, it wasn't impossible, but it was very unlikely that could happen. And it took a lot of trust for people to even kind of believe McAfee, thinking that it could go up that high. And so, quite honestly, I'm more confident now that Bitcoin would go up to 10, 20, $100 million than I was back then when I made the video that Bitcoin would go up to $500,000. Because it has a much longer track record. I've known about it for a lot longer. And I also see what it's like. I understand what Bitcoin's compared to nowadays. Because, yeah, sure, the value of Bitcoin is going to go up. But also the value of the thing we're comparing it to is going down drastically. Like if you look at those charts of the purchasing power of $1, they like tank. And so that's what we're comparing it to. So it's almost like back then, I would say like, I hope, but now it's like essentially a mathematical certainty.
Yeah, it's like a math equation. I mean, if you keep printing money, the value of everything else is naturally going to go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that you said like up to 100 million. I mean, I guess you're not giving like a time frame either, but I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, will we get to that number? But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
I mean, look at it in, what is this, 9 years or something like that? It's gone from 2,000 to 70,000. I would say, and that's like a 35x in 10 years, something like that. Now, it may not continue that trajectory, but if it was to 35x in another 10 years, that would be what, like 72, I don't know, 2 million, something like that. ish territory. So, and another 10 years after that, if it did the same type of thing. Now, it could stall out, it could go flat, it could turn upwards. Who's to say? But it is one of those things where mathematically, if you keep increasing the denominator, that it's going to eventually happen.
Well, I think it's interesting too, is like, what's his name? Like Peter Schiff, the dude,
the goal,
right? He's like super, yeah. So like he makes this, I know he's made this claim in the past, like, Bitcoin is like I forget what the terminology is for it. It's like the bigger fool's game or whatever, where it's like, you just buy it because you think somebody's going to buy it for more later down the road, right? I'm not arguing against that, trust me. But I think what is actually interesting about that is like, that's actually not what's going to happen probably with crypto based on what we just talked about today, which is like, yeah, back then it was that kind of idea of like, I'm going to buy it at 2,000 and hope that it goes up to 100,000. But now there's like a real use case for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general that gold cannot fulfill, which is like agentic trading, right? Or agentic commerce, right? Like you cannot connect your LLM to a gold bar and be like, communicate with somebody in China and buy this. Yeah, buy me some furniture, right? So it makes me think like maybe there is something really here that's like people are going to adopt this. And it made me think too, like this is totally off topic, but it was just interesting to me. I was watching something the other day that was like, if you look at the universe as a whole, the precious things that we think of on Earth, like diamonds, gold, platinum, they exist in like giant supply across the universe. They're like, across planets and asteroids, there's just tons of it, right? But the one thing that there really is not anywhere, like the most limited supply material that we have on Earth, is actually one of the cheapest, which is wood. Because wood comes from life. I mean, it doesn't exist anywhere else as far as we know, right? So like wood is such a limited resource if you look at it on a universal scale. Totally off topic.
That's a great point, because literally, I love reading sci-fi, and in all these sci-fi books, like wood is always this thing where like they have like in spaceships and everything like that, they have like imitation wood, and they'll be like fantasizing about what wood could have been like. But it is like in all these sci-fi books, it's like a super rare commodity.
It surprised me because we value these things because they're precious and shiny or whatever, but they're really there's a ton of it. If we look at on a universal level, there's a ton of it, and it's the same thing in a way with cryptocurrency, right? And money is, if we look at all the fiat currency in the world and the derivatives and all the derivatives of that, it's almost infinite. And the one thing that's used as currency currently that is not in unlimited supply is cryptocurrency. And the more that we build use case around it, the higher the value naturally has to go.
Randall, any final words for, where you think crypto will be in the next year, or where Bitcoin will be in the next year?
This time next year, what's the price going to be? Tell us.
It'll probably be almost exactly where it is right now. I don't really, because we're kind of like in that interim period, and it'll probably I mean, who knows where it's going to go, but it'll probably drop a bit over the summer, and then it'll come back after that, and we'll probably be right around where we are right now, and then that year it'll probably start going up slowly, and then FOMO will happen and it'll go up quickly. But I mean, who's to tell? Because it's like, I guess if there was one final word, it's that the best thing for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is time. So it's like, I remember when I first got into it, there was this video about this teenage Bitcoin millionaire, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, this kid's like 14 or something, and he's already a millionaire in Bitcoin." And they're like, "Oh, I wish I would have bought it." And it's like, yeah, that's cool, but like, there's a lesson to be learned from the story. And if you watch the video, he's a teenage Bitcoin millionaire because he bought Bitcoin with money that his grandmother gave him, and then he held on to it for 6 or 7 years. And I think that's the key for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is time, because all these things that we talked about, they take time, and money printing and the effects of it take time. So the best thing you can do is just try not to, go bust. Try not to get yourself out of the game by losing it.